All right, this is Pops. Let me give you my take on Superman. A little late compared to what many people have done, and give you some interesting thoughts on what I like, what I didn't like, and why, where I think some people are really way off base on their assessments, and kind of my thoughts on where things are going to kind of go from here. So let's talk about the Superman. All right, so the film opens with a fight scene that happens off camera. We've seen this shot many, many times in some of the promotional material where he crashes into the snow and he ultimately whistles for Krypto to come get him and takes him to the Fortress of Solitude to recoup. And he uses these different robots that he calls them by their numbers, doesn't have names, that kind of thing. And it sets up the engineer is going to be following him, made by Lex, and try to figure out where this secret fortress is. And I think one of the things that right away that it was impressed upon me was how much I was not going to enjoy Krypto. I was really trying to get into the vibe of, hey, Krypto is finally on screen. We get a live action version of him. He's not really a big enough dog. He's more like a terrier instead of like, a Labrador or Golden Retriever. And he's also like a total goofball, obnoxious puppy that won't listen to Superman. And it's played for a gag that goes to the end. And by the way, let me just go ahead and say, I'm not going to hold back on spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, this isn't really a review for you. I just need to talk fluidly through the movie. I find the movie to be pretty disconjointed with sort of like to connect points. So like I need to connect a point now to something that happens at the very end of the movie. It's supposed to be a reveal, a gotcha, a thing. And I don't really find it that way. I found it to be awful. So he doesn't listen to Superman because he's not Superman's dog. He's actually Supergirl's dog, who has a brief moment where she shows up at the end of the movie, which we'll talk to at some point. But I just think it's James Gunn inserting his dog experiences in here for Krypto, and I just didn't really care for it. So as I said, the engineer follows Superman. They figure out where the fortress is, and Lex is getting in with Ultraman. And obviously, this was a big tell for me because right away, the only way he's going to get in is because he's some sort of clone of Superman, because the DNA is what opens the door. And it walks through this attack sequence on the robots with horrible CGI because you're seeing Lex just walk among the chaos, and it was just really bad. And then Krypto attacks, and everything is distracted because we're going to give Superman something to do. And this is that big creature kaiju thing. And the big creature kaiju thing is released like a little Stitch monster, and it's going to, quote, grow, and it'll get bigger. And then it just is. And this is that line you saw in some of the trailers, hey, eyes up here so we can punch the thing. But Superman is trying to figure out how to get the thing out of the environment, reduce the risk to humans and damage also to the monster itself, so nothing will, don't kill it, we'll just like figure out how to deal with it so it can get experimented on. But no, the, quote, justice gang shows up. And I know you can tell from my tone how much of I'm a fan of the, quote, justice gang, made up. I don't know why we just didn't call it the Justice League International or the Justice League or whatever. Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific. And it's this weird thing about how they got it handled, and this is what we're going to deal with. And I don't know. So then, meanwhile, Lex, because basically they just kill it. There's a tax on its eye and whatever. And oh, it was so distracting. It's just James Gunn has these weird moments. We saw this with Suicide Squad and the eye on Starro. We see it with this sort of like flippant attitude he has towards these characters. Like they're not really ever meant to be model citizens or the icons that the DC universe really is. A part of what makes the DC different than Marvel is that they're not like just regular Joe people. They're more like these larger than life icons. And yeah, you have Mr. Terrific and even Guy Gardner, who's probably one of the most accessible of the Green Lanterns. They're different. They're more street level, but many of the others are not, and Superman in particular. And I think that's one of the early problems that you can feel from the movie. He's trying to make Superman so regular and so generic. It's just reducing him down to something that's just not nearly as interesting. And we have the interaction. We saw it with the trailer, the footage with the interview and how emotional it makes Clark, because off screen in the beginning you have this text that he had stopped the war. The war is probably meant to be sort of like the soft peddling of a metaphor of politics in the landscapes, whether it be Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, whatever. It's not very heavy handed at all. Their leader is a little weird, kind of like I don't know, Boris Johnson meets Putin amalgam, who's like got Yahoo Serious type hair. It it's all fine. I think Rachel Brosnahan I think is really good as Lois. David Cornsweet was okay. He didn't change his body language enough for me to be Superman versus his Clark, especially in that scene. But I didn't dislike that. I thought it was all fine. But I think the problem is we're just like, what are we doing? He cares and he's so emotional about all the social media stuff. Just do good. Meanwhile, the Lex thing is about hacking the computer and trying to figure things out. So there's this message from Jor-El and Laura that came with Kal-El when he came to Earth, and the message was damaged. And so the whole premise is there's so much more to this message. Now, when we do get to see the Hall of Justice, where the Justice saying go, it's a beautiful image. It's epic. It's fantastic. But it's just the three of them. It was such a downer that you didn't even have other cameos like a Peacemaker or references to Creature Commandos or anything like that. And it's only Mr. Terrific who really seems like a full flushed out character that makes sense. Like you sort of like understand that he's very serious about what he's doing. Hawkgirl's like got her feet propped up, and Guy Gardner's always cutting, wise jokes, and it's all jokey joke James Gunn stuff, and that's kind of where we're at with things. And as I said, Mr. Terrific is probably the best character in the movie, like most interesting character. He was the one you would want a TV show or a movie from, but there's really not a ton of backstory or interesting, like how did he get here kind of thing. It's just kind of he's there. So it would be the easy thing to kind of parlay on. And he and Lois sort of go after saving Superman because obviously Lex has manipulated the government and they got this little wormhole machine. They take him to this little prison where we meet Metamorpho, which they call him Element Man. And he, of course, puts to this Kryptonite. So you have just like a whole bunch of these cells of people who basically Lex is irritated by or whatever. They're in prison there. And it's really one of the best scenes of the movie is him being attacked and protecting Lois and just this big fight scene. The musical cue is awful, and I tell you what, one of my big pet peeves of this movie is the score and the music. Anytime there's something important or interesting that will happen, the music cue breaks to the John Williams ripoff music every single time. And once you hear it and see it that way, you realize how derivative all of this really is. Like, he wants to have Suicide Squad, Guardians of the Galaxy feel with these different characters. There's so much going on in this movie. The tone and the tenor is not uniform. It's not really a Superman movie. He's saved constantly by other characters. And anytime you get to something that's really moving, they change the motion. They either crack a joke, they change the music, we cut away to something different. The gravity never lands. And I think this is why James Gunn is a terrible candidate for doing Superman, because he doesn't, and he said this before, right? He said this like when he was initially offered Superman before, he didn't get Superman. I don't think I still doesn't get Superman. He still doesn't. He's inserted his own dog. He's got his little inspiration from his father or family that he's talked about, but Superman is so much bigger than all this. Like Krypto would listen to Superman. Krypto's Superman's dog, not Supergirl's dog. Like Superman isn't going to get caught up in the petty hate. He would just know people are just misunderstanding. He'll win them over by doing good things. So the whole concept of the movie is kind of a mess. So I paused here because I don't know what best way to kind of attack the Lex Luthor thing. Lex Luthor's fine. He's just like Lex Luthor Smallville version. He's like Michael Rosenbaum's emotional version back at Smallville, not actually at Metropolis being this, you know, overload of this major corporation. No, he's running like a team of like tech people, like some sort of weird, you know, Elon Musk person controlling Ultraman through these computers and yelling out codes like that sound like a battleship game, like B5 and G32. And these guys are like smiling like they're so cool that they're throwing punches and they're beating up Superman. And it was so telegraphed that Ultraman's not really the Ultraman. He's really just a clone. I don't understand why they didn't just say that he developed this wormhole crap and then just went and stole another Superman from a different universe. But we'll get to more of that in a minute, I guess. But all of this stuff got so irritating. And anytime that things didn't go Lex's way, he become like a petulant child. It was so not Lex. It was so not Lex. Now he has a intimidating scene, like I said, in that cell scene where he actually executes someone. That part was pretty cool. But later that doesn't get his way, whatever. He just knocks over his pencils for these people to pick up and stuff. It was so dumb. I hated it so much. It was terrible. Like, what is going on? So Nicholas Holt personally, I think was fine as Lex, or at least this version of Lex. He's doing the best he can. The issues with the script, the issues with the story. And I'm assuming so the biggest spoiler of all comes at the end of the movie. Obviously, it's not going to go Lex's way. Superman will overcome. He does. He has a great little speech, but the speech that Lex gives doesn't totally work for me. And I don't I don't really know exactly how to explain why Lex's speech about envy and all of that doesn't work, because it Lex doesn't Lex is so much bigger and grander than envy. He would be so much more difficult, and then he doesn't get his way. He cries. He's like shedding tears. You're like, what the WTF, man? What is going on? So I didn't like that. I liked the idea of him being molded of brain versus brain over brawn, and I like the fact that his little group there attack with little Lex suits, kind of like from the animated cartoon and some show. I get all that. I wish he had a suit too, man. I wish he had a way of dealing. I don't know. It was. I feel bad for Nicholas Holt because I think he's fine enough. It was okay. All right, I didn't really see a great still here of Mom and Pa Kent with Superman, which is what I was looking for. So I can't stand it, man. I don't understand why Paul is still here. It changes the motivation of his timeline of becoming Superman, changing the origin. And I know we can point to comic books. There's been so many different versions. I mean, Superman's, we're talking about the 30s, so the late 30s. I got that. They can do what they want to do. It just doesn't work as well. Like the idea of the Kents being sort of like this noble, regal representative of Earth that are like the homegrown pro America, freedom loving, all of those type hard work. These are the ethics that were ingrained in this super being that could dominate the earth. And between this and that message from Jor-El, which is like, oh no, you're there to dominate the planet and get a harem and have a bunch of kids and what, changing these two dynamics ruin Superman and make him basically like General Zod's kid. He basically is like, General Zod, send your kid there and go take over the planet. And by the way, if Earthling parents find you, they're just these hick people who are talking about something being on the box, and they're all hillbilly. They're not in a fancy country house with all these cornfields or anything. It just, nothing feels right. It all feels like James Gunn trying to subvert what is expected. Look at me. I did something different. Instead of leaning into why the Glenn Ford stuff worked, why the death of Pa is important. It's not dumb like it was in Man of Steel, where it's like it's a tornado, like that was retarded. It just feels like everything is tweaked just enough to remind you of things that but it's the James Gunn version of everything. And the James Gunn version of thing is just not very good. On that note, too, there's this thing where they bring Clark there after he's been, he's got to recoup. And Paul starts crying. There's a lot of men crying in this movie. And there's a speech, which is fine, but Paul being alive and all the memories and the stories and stuff that what Paul's saying should have just been a memory. Should have just been Clark dreaming or recouping, and that would have given you the exact same impact. And all you had to do is have Paul be dead. Like the fact that Lois and Ma wouldn't have known exactly what to do is fine. He's just there in the sun to recoup. I don't know. Yeah, would have worked out a lot better for me. The other James Gunn thing that's just extremely irritating. This is another moment with Lois and Clark. He has to go, but in the background you see the Justice Gang. God, I can't even really call them that with a straight face. It's just irritating. You call them fighting Starro and stuff in the background. You're distracted by this entire conversation because of all the stuff in the background. This is James Gunn. Look at me, I'm so funny. Oh, ha ha, the funny, the Marvel. It's that kind of nonsense instead of just lean into the fact that Lois and Clark love each other, they care about each other. He is Superman. He's got a job to do. He's got to go get out there and do his thing. And it just he can't get out of his own way. I'm just sort of like over the James Gunn thing. Like it just never stops. He makes references that I don't think the kids get, like Cronkite and stuff. Lots of cursing in this movie. You know, the faster garage door gag with Mr. Terrific. You got a spaceship at your door? I haven't gotten to it yet. It's so retarded. Like it's just he thinks he's so much funnier than he is. The music is always a big thing. I feel like it doesn't belong in the Superman movie. He's ripping off John Williams like constantly when it matters most. And the best example is when there's the war scene at the end with the little kid raising the flag of hope, basically, like Superman, come save us. It is total John Williams. And that's why you feel something. That's why it gets you. That's the reason that you like this movie is moments that are really impacting you is because they're cheating and using John Williams music and they're cheating all those tropes that you actually wanted all along. The rest of it is just vanilla generic nonsense. I don't get why Hawk Girl's constantly screaming the way she does. I hated the engineer and her sneering and the fact that she does this thing with the blades. We saw that in the tease. And then she does a handstand to fight in the other direction instead of just turning. And it's just this CGI gimmicky nonsense. I also want to call my shot with James Gunn because he thinks he's so much more clever than he actually is. He thinks he's convinced people he reads more comic books than I actually think he did. I assume if there is a sequel that we'll see Ultraman again because he kind of gets sucked into the black hole thing. He would just be Bizarro Superman. Like I don't understand why he's not already Bizarro Superman, but that's just me. I think that there's so many moments that are just lost where James Gunn can't get out of his own way with his James Gunn tropes, his James Gunn things he loves to do. And Superman isn't the best thing for that, in my opinion. Overall, so look, there's all sorts of stuff we could talk about with Mrs. Tessbacher and Jimmy. That whole scene is ruined because there's this big thing where she's giving Jimmy the information. It's kind of the key to everything, but then it has to be we have to stumble over it and have some gags because Jimmy doesn't want to be with her all weekend. It's just constant stuff that kind of undermines what works in the movie because there are so many things that do work. David Cornsweet is fine at times. I feel like it's more of a Superboy movie than a Superman movie, but Lois is fine. Everyone, I'm fine. Look, I know they changed, Perry's black again. We have another Otis is black. They keep making changes and getting further and further away from where we were. But like at the end, we get drunk Supergirl showing up that teases the Tom King story, which is basically 21-year-old Supergirl has to go off to Red Planet so she can drink because the alcohol won't work on her, which is kind of weird because she's home. How did she get home and still be drunk? They don't care, man. She has to curse. She has to be gross, and it all undermines the positives, right? So it becomes a Midland movie. It becomes like a 2.5 out of 5 movie. Two to 2.5, depending on how much of the comic book lore. I think it's more fun because it's super fast paced and actually to a fault. Like it's like there's not even time to breathe and let story beats hit you and give you any sort of like gravity to the situations. I also can't stand the fact that they didn't have Lex. He should have changed the message, or the engineer changed the message. Maybe that's why Mr. Terrific didn't figure it out because he doesn't understand the engineer. And the message was not the message from the parents should not be go have a bunch of harem and have a bunch of chicks and dominate the planet. That's retarded. So it moves fast. John Williams' music is interspliced in enough, makes you feel okay, like you have a good enough time. This is again another movie I'm going to say this is not going to age well. Every time you watch this movie again, it's going to keep getting worse. That's my take on this movie. So it may be a 2.5 out of 5 for me. If I watch it again, it's going to be a 2. If I keep harping on all these minutiae and they're going to just keep getting worse, I'm going to pick up on more minutiae that's not going to add up. So there's little things that you kind of, because there's like tons of comic booky stuff that I do enjoy, like the monkeys with the things are in the little pocket zone, but how do you make the pocket zone? And just there's every time you move forward with something you like, there's other things around it that tick you off. I love moments and there are things I like, but at the end of the day, this is not anything it's going to save a DCU. It's not going to make them tons of money. it had a good start. And you know what? They've got 2 weeks before Fantastic Four, and we're sort of headed into the end of July to August. This movie is not making $1 billion. I will be shocked beyond all get out if it has even legs to get past the 600 to 800 range, which is where it will probably end up in that range. I think it's going to queue up all the Snyder Bros and all of their insanity because they overhype all the stuff that was with Snyder. And I think at the end of the day, Gunn will carry on and he'll get to do another project or two. I think Supergirl is already done, but that's basically like True Grit with a drunken little girl who's got an attitude problem, and they're going to put Jason Momoa's Lobo in it. So I don't know, man. I see people touting all these different projects and things, and I just scratch my head going, there's nothing there that is sort of like classic or iconic or dealing with the lore and the history that made these characters so famous. And again, look, I know I'm a different breed. I'm a different cat. I'm an old guy. I like Christopher Reeve, right? He's my Superman. I get it. I'm the old guy. I'm the exception to the rule, probably. But I also kind of have kids and grandkids and understand how marketing works in the grand scheme of things. And this movie should have had a flood of an aisle with cool toys. They should be re-releasing anything and everything with their Superman stuff on it. You're not going to upset fans who, if the Snyder Bros are going to cry, then they'll let them cry. Who cares? But you could have released like anniversary or special edition versions of Superman animated toys. You could have re-released some of the original classic stuff. You could have done all your Golden Age stuff, Footprint and all that one last time before it hits public domain. Man, so many missed opportunities. That's the hardest part with modern cinema, is the missed opportunities here, because a lot of it's good and a lot of it is not good at all and undermines the positives. So my general take on it, I will now go out into the world and hear what everybody else has to say, because I haven't watched anybody's stuff. It's really hard to avoid everybody's stuff. The thumbnails kind of have told me, because all these thumbnails pop up, so I get a good feel for that. I'm probably uh, with most of the people that are in my creator circles, but I don't know if that's where the normies and stuff are. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody about it, so I'm way behind on doing videos. So we'll see what the end result is. So you guys tell me. Did you like it? What your thoughts are? Love to hear from you. I am Pops.